Tina could hardly believe her luck when Julian got down on one knee on that warm summer evening. The romantic proposal at La Stella restaurant was like something out of a fairy tale, with rose petals scattered on the floor, candlelight, and soft music playing in the background. Of course, she said, yes, and her tears of joy mingled with the sparkle of the engagement ring on her finger. She and Julian had been a couple for 3 years after meeting at her best friend's birthday party. There had been a special connection between them from the start. Julian, the successful architect with the mischievous smile, and Tina, the creative graphic designer, complemented each other perfectly. Her family was thrilled about the engagement. Her sister Jana, in particular, seemed genuinely happy for them, helping with the initial wedding plans and spending lots of time with the couple. Only occasionally, when Jana thought no one was looking, would a strange shadow cross her face. But Tina was too absorbed in her preparations to notice. The first months of their engagement were like a dream. They were already searching for the perfect wedding venue. Tina was trying on wedding dresses, and Julian was organizing plans for their future home. Their parents supported them in everything, and it seemed nothing could cloud their happiness. On weekends, they often met with their circle of friends, which included Peter, Julian's best friend since school days. The group had grown close, and their evenings together were filled with laughter and plans for the future. Tina felt completely at home in this circle of people who meant so much to her. The first 6 months of their engagement were filled with anticipation and planning. Tina and Julian were on cloud 9, supported by their families who were already tackling the wedding preparations. It seemed nothing could dampen their happiness. Yet precisely during this time of greatest joy, a storm was brewing in secret that would shake their entire life to its foundations. And the person who would ignite this storm was none other than her own sister Jana, whose jealousy was eating away at her soul like a creeping poison. It was a Friday evening in late autumn when events spiraled out of control. Jana had invited everyone to a spontaneous party at her new apartment. For the housewarming, she'd said, although she'd been living there for 2 months already. Tina had been hesitant at first. She'd been looking forward to a quiet evening with Julian, who was supposed to return from an exhausting business trip. But Jana had insisted. Julian can join us later, she'd said with that special smile Tina had known since childhood. It was the smile that had always gotten her sister whatever she wanted. So Tina agreed, not knowing that this evening would change everything. The party was in full swing when Tina arrived. Music was blaring through the apartment, and small groups of people were engaged in animated conversations everywhere. Peter, Julian's best friend, was already there and greeted her enthusiastically. He seemed strangely nervous, his hands trembling slightly as he handed her a drink. "Special mix from Jana," he explained with an uncertain smile. "You have to try it." The cocktail tasted sweet and exotic, and soon Tina felt dizzy. The lights in the room began to blur, and the music seemed to come from far away. Jana kept appearing at her side, bringing new drinks, and pulling her from one group to another. "Julian just called," she whispered at some point. "His flight's delayed. He won't be here until tomorrow." Tina nodded drowsily, her sister's words reaching her as if through cotton wool. The hours passed in a haze. Later, Tina could only remember fragments. Peter's hand on her shoulder, the dim light in the guest room where she'd retreated to rest. And then, darkness. The next morning, she woke up with a pounding headache in an unfamiliar bed. Next to her lay Peter, still in his clothes from last night. Panic rose within her as she tried to comprehend the situation. What had happened? Her memories were blurry, incomplete. Trembling, she gathered her things and fled the apartment. Her phone showed several missed calls from Julian and a message. "Came back last night after all. Where were you? We need to talk." What Tina didn't realize at that moment, Jana had carefully orchestrated the entire evening. The seemingly chance encounter with Peter, the mysterious cocktails, everything was part of a perfidious plan. That night would change Tina's life forever, and the nightmare was just beginning. For Jana had already made sure that Julian would be in exactly the wrong place at exactly the right time. In the days following the fateful party, Events unfolded rapidly. Julian was beside himself with anger and disappointment. Jana had ensured he arrived at her apartment at precisely the moment when Tina lay unconscious next to Peter in the guest room. She had accidentally taken a photo, supposedly to document their drunken state. In reality, it was the final act of her carefully planned intrigue. "I can't believe you did this to me," were Julian's first words when Tina tried to reach him. His voice was cold, distant, completely unlike the man she knew and loved. "Jana told me everything. How long has this been going on between you and Peter?" Tina desperately tried to explain that she couldn't remember anything, that something must have been wrong with the drinks. But Jana had already spread her version of events. How Tina had supposedly flirted with Peter all evening, how they had repeatedly disappeared together, how she had accidentally overheard conversations between them that suggested previous secret meetings. Peter himself had vanished without a trace. Later, Tina would learn that Jana had told him a similar story. How Tina had supposedly harbored feelings for him for a long time, how she had planned the evening to leave Julian. Confused and under the influence of the manipulated drinks himself, he had withdrawn in shame. The rumors spread like wildfire through their social circle. Jana played the role of the sympathetic sister perfectly, outwardly supporting Tina while sowing further doubts behind her back. "I don't want to speak ill of my sister, but," became her standard phrase, followed by subtle hints and strategically placed half-truths. Tina desperately tried to uncover the truth. She had blood tests done that actually showed traces of suspicious substances. But by then, it was too late. Jana had ensured that no one would believe the results. "She's just trying to make excuses," she whispered to Julian. "You know how creative she can be." The engagement was called off. Their shared circle of friends fell apart. Julian withdrew completely, too hurt by the supposed betrayal. Peter, plagued by guilt and confused by Jana's manipulation, avoided all contact. And Jana? She appeared to stand firmly by Tina's side while secretly pulling the strings and reveling in the chaos she had caused. What no one suspected, hidden in Jana's laptop, was a diary where she had meticulously documented her plan. Every detail, from the manipulated drinks to the precisely timed chance encounters. It was her personal trophy, her masterpiece of destruction, motivated by years of jealousy toward her perfect sister. But this document wouldn't remain hidden forever. The following months were like an endless nightmare for Tina. Her once perfect life lay in ruins, and every attempt to reveal the truth seemed to push her deeper into the abyss. The looks from people who had once smiled at her warmly were now marked by distrust and judgment. Her work as a graphic designer suffered significantly under the situation. Creative ideas, which had once come so easily to her, now eluded her. Several times, she caught herself sitting in front of a blank screen for hours, unable to draw even a single line. Her clients began looking for alternatives, and her boss grew increasingly impatient. Jana, meanwhile, seemed to flourish in her role as the supportive sister. She was constantly present, offering Tina help and playing the concerned sister for everyone else. "I'm so worried about her," Tina once overheard her saying to their mother on the phone. "She's changed so much since the Julian incident. Maybe we should consider professional help." The loneliness was the worst part. Her phone, once full of messages, now remained eerily silent. The few remaining friends gradually withdrew, subtly influenced by Jana's skilled manipulations. "I want to be there for you," they would say, "but you have to admit, the whole story sounds very strange." One evening, sitting alone in her apartment, Tina accidentally found an old photo of herself and Julian. It showed them laughing on the beach, the sun setting, Julian holding her tightly in his arms. The memory hit her like a physical blow. She broke down, crying for hours until no tears were left. The lowest point came when she accidentally saw Julian in town. He wasn't alone. Beside him walked a pretty brunette, and both looked happy and relaxed. Jana had coincidentally told her about the new woman in his life, but seeing it in person was something entirely different. That night, Tina made a decision. She had to leave this city that now consisted only of painful memories. Her parents were dismayed when they learned of her plans to move to another city. "But darling, you can't just run away from your problems," they said. What they didn't understand, it wasn't running away, it was a desperate attempt to survive. Jana played her role perfectly here too. She even organized a small farewell party, which hardly anyone attended. "You see," she whispered to a mutual acquaintance, "she's completely isolated. It's really sad." All while carefully hiding her triumphant smile. What Tina didn't know, her departure was exactly what Jana had wanted. In her hidden diary that evening she wrote, "Phase 4 complete. She's leaving. Finally, I've won." But fate had other plans, and Jana's carefully constructed house of lies would soon begin to show its first cracks. A year had passed since Tina's departure. In her new home, she had slowly found her footing, her work as a graphic designer at a small agency helping to keep her mind occupied. But fate had an unexpected turning point in store for her. On an ordinary Tuesday morning, she received an email from Mario, an IT specialist from Jana's company. "I need to show you something," he wrote briefly. "It's about your sister." Initially, Tina hesitated. Too often had she hoped the truth would come to light, only to be disappointed again. But something in the urgency of his message caught her attention. During routine maintenance, Mario had repaired Jana's laptop and accidentally discovered an encrypted diary. What he read deeply disturbed him. Detailed records of every step of her intrigue. The manipulated drinks, the precisely timed coincidences, even photos she had edited to make the situation appear worse. With trembling hands, Tina read the evidence of her innocence. Jana had documented everything meticulously, driven by a pathological jealousy that had built up over years. "Finally, she gets what she deserves," Jana had written. "She was always the perfect one, the popular one, the one who had everything. Now I've taken it all away." Tina acted quickly. With Mario's help, she secured all evidence and contacted a lawyer. Then she called Peter, who finally answered her calls after all this time. When he learned the truth, he broke down. He had always wondered why his memories of that evening were so hazy. Jana's manipulated drinks had made him a victim too. The confrontation with Jana was dramatic. Faced with the evidence, her carefully constructed house of lies collapsed. "You always had everything," she screamed at Tina. "Our parents' love, the perfect fiancé, the great friends. I was always just your shadow." In that moment, Tina recognized how deep her sister's pain ran. A realization that explained much, though excused nothing. Julian was one of the last to learn the truth. He had since ended his new relationship, too burdened by unresolved feelings for Tina. When he saw the evidence, the realization hit him hard. They sat together for hours, talking about what had happened, crying together over lost time. The healing process began slowly. Friends returned, apologizing for their hasty judgments. Jana had to seek therapeutic help, a condition her parents set to maintain any contact. Tina herself needed time to forgive. Not just others, but herself for not recognizing the signs earlier. A year later, Tina stood again in La Stella restaurant. This time, Julian had invited her. When he knelt before her, now with a new ring, and the question of whether she would dare a fresh start, she knew that despite everything, she had grown stronger. The scars would remain, but they had taught her that truth, no matter how long it takes, finds its way to light.